Welcome, everyone, to another edition of 45 Forward, where our mission is to help you, our listeners from Los Angeles to Long Island, make your second half of life even better than the first. Today, we're going to explore a hot topic. It's called the Great Resignation. In the midst of all the anxiety and unpredictability of this ongoing pandemic, more than 4 million Americans have been quitting their jobs every month, some searching for better opportunities, others just leaving the workforce entirely. The exodus of workers has left millions of jobs unfilled, creating operational challenges for many companies. And while workers across age groups are leaving their companies, resignation rates, somewhat surprisingly, are the highest among mid-career employees. What's going on? And what does this voluntary exodus mean to those leaving jobs and looking for new jobs, careers, or lifestyles? In today's episode, we sort out all these issues with Scott Possessor, a widely recognized staffing expert, executive recruiter, and radio show host who's seen his share of tumultuous changes in the job market over more than 25 years. Scott will talk about the various factors motivating workers, from the desire for a better work-life balance to searching for more fulfilling jobs, at least better wages, benefits, and a workplace environment. He'll explain the opportunities that the pandemic has unexpectedly opened up for workers, but also the potential hazards of leapfrogging to new jobs, as well as ways to get a better job without ever having to leave your company. The host of the weekly radio show Radio Jobline, Scott will offer his observations and some solutions to the latest strategies for job hunting, which remains a challenging endeavor as companies struggle with understaffed HR departments and job seekers often deal with the frustrations of being ghosted by companies. And Scott will talk about the bigger questions facing many folks as they progress in their careers beyond the pandemic. Where do you want to be in your final frontier, the last phase of your retirement, or even continuing into your retirement years, however you want to spend them? So now let's meet today's guest, Scott Possessor. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Ron. Great to be here with you.
Yes, and I should say welcome back, Scott, because when I started 45 Forward in January of 2021, you were one of my first guests, on January 18th to be precise.
And I appreciate it. And we didn't even have video that day, as we were just recalling.
Right. So happy New Year and happy 1 year anniversary to us.
Great. It's great. Well, congratulations on your first full year. And you've been doing a fantastic job. And I listen to the show all the time.
Great. Appreciate that. So, of course, there's a lot's happened since then. At that time, there were a lot of uncertainty. There was a new presidency, lots of questions about going forward with politics, social issues, the economy. And then there was COVID Chapter 2. Of course, the first year, Chapter 1, things are shut down. Last year, we were thinking okay, well, this was the year of the vaccine development. We thought we were heading towards stemming this pandemic, and now here we are. Now we're in Chapter 3. We don't know where we're going right now.
Yep.
And one of the things that we really didn't think about, was this notion of the Great Resignation. I don't think we really saw that at the time. I didn't certainly see it. So tell us, Scott, a little bit more about what is this about? It's gotten a lot of press, but explain a little bit about this.
COVID actually is responsible for all this because it created the perfect storm, Ron, like a formula, almost like a formula out of that you might pull out of an Excel spreadsheet. Take this, add this, put that on top of this, and add this, and then you got chaos. So that's basically what has happened here. So the pandemic proved that people who were not privy to working at home could in fact work from home and do so successfully.
Right.
So that opened a huge amount of eyes. And I think that is the number one reason for the Great Resignation. People realize that they can work from home. Now, true, not everybody can work from home. If you're a first responder, you're an EMT, you're a doctor, whatever, you can't. I understand that. But a lot of people can. So many people. I would venture to say 75% of the workforce are not in that category, and they can in fact work from home. So one of the things people are questing for, trying to find, is more remote work. Now, to answer the bell, companies are beginning to offer hybrid roles. So, and I'm telling you this from a staffing perspective. So,
right.
So like my top company, who shall remain nameless, is now saying, well, this job can be 2 days a week from home. Brand new jobs that they never would have offered any home to, any remote work to. So the companies are responding, and this is actually making the jobs more attractive to candidates,
Right.
those 2 days a week from home, in some cases, 3 days a week from home. I mean, it's pretty damn good. I work at the office 4 days a week right now, but I enjoy my day from home, my 1 day a week from home. So that's one of the main things that caused all of this, like a domino effect.
Right.
And then you had people falling out of industries, Ronnie. You had people from hospitality that couldn't get a job working for another restaurant because they were all in the same boat.
Right.
And a lot of them left the hospitality field. And some of them went into entrepreneurial adventures. Some of them changed industries and went elsewhere. But now, when restaurants are starting to advertise to get people to come back to work for them, or at least until Omicron hit, they weren't able to find candidates because the candidates had left the business.
Right.
And
right.
were no longer interested in working in the hospitality industry. So that caused another hole, like another vacuum that had to get filled in. And throughout the job market, various sectors of the job market were hit, some of them increasingly bad, some of them pretty bad, some of them not too bad. But a lot of the sectors were affected by this. And then people started saying, well, all right, if I'm going to try to get a hybrid job where I can work more from home, why don't I get more money? Why don't I get better benefits?
Right.
Why don't I stop working in a cube? Give me an office to work in. You got all this extra office space. 32% of New York City office space is empty. 32% of all New York City office space is empty. So spread it out, spread everybody out, give everybody an office. So I think that is happening. And they're now thinking of new ways to attract employees. So between the hybrid, the more money, better benefits, this is costing money companies a lot, to keep up with the Joneses and be able to attract the good candidates, but they have no choice, Ron.
Right.
They have no choice.
Yeah. Well, I think that, it's sort of an accidental discovery. And I think on both sides, I think that for a lot of employees, I think, they realize, wait a minute, I can get a lot of work done at home. I have the flexibility of not having to commute, so I don't waste all that time. There are certainly challenges. If you have kids at home, certainly one of the big challenges, of course, was that schools were shut for a while, so that there was this stress on parents having to school their kids and take care of their kids, facing what in previous times were just traditional childcare things. You couldn't work at home if you didn't have childcare. That was one of the issues, and I think
that's part of the formula that I was talking about, along with the technology. Up until 10 years ago, and we've been around as humans quite a long time. Up until 10 years ago, we didn't have Zoom. We didn't have Microsoft Teams, that's really gives you such great transmission. And we didn't have enough broadband. So this was, like I said, the perfect storm of the marriage of technology, the desire for different work benefits and remote work. And now the companies responding, and trying to meet the need of their candidates. Very interesting phenomena that's going on. I don't think this will ever happen again because it's already happened. It happened once, and that's it. We're done. So now you're going to have people working remotely for the rest of time, whenever they can. Not having extra traffic, keeping more cars off the road, keeping less sets of lungs breathing on each other's lives, and it all makes sense. To the worker of today.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think the workers realized that there was a tremendous advantage of this. I think, some of the surveys do look at the fact that, people are taking this opportunity, enjoying this flexibility, but also some of it was the fact that they felt that this is an opportunity to make a change because they did feel their employers didn't really care about them that much, didn't care about these situations. So I think you're absolutely right in that employers, for better and worse, mostly for better, are realizing if they want to have the best employees, they have to basically offer these kinds of benefits, and think about attracting the best candidates. Which leads me to one other point that we've talked about in previous times, but sort of the hazard of this, just being a little cautious before you leap. So. There's nothing wrong with this is an opportunity for workers, but you've talked to me before about this issue of, the hazard of leaping and changing jobs too often.
Yeah, I definitely I wrote an article for Long Island Business News, and the publisher, gave me a challenge, and he said, you got to write something different. Don't write the same old, thing that everybody else is writing. And I came to a realization as I was reading article after article after article about the same subject. Everybody was saying the same thing, Ronnie. So there was nothing new, but I decided that there is something new, and that's that. What if you took a new job before the pandemic? So let's say 2018, you changed jobs in 2018. Then the pandemic came in 2019, right? So, and by 2020, your job was eliminated. Okay. Now that's two jobs in the last 2 years. Now, because of the Great Resignation, some recruiter calls you up and they go, I got this great job for you. It's hybrid. You'd be able to work 2 days a week from home. It pays more than your current job, blah, 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 blah. Now you make a third change. So I'm seeing resumes that now have 2 and 3 jobs in the last 2 years. Right. 2 and 3 jobs in the last 2 years. So what happened to the 25-year man with the gold watch? Well, that went away in Y2K in the year 2000, and that never came back. But I think it's gotten worse, and I think the people's resumes today look like traffic accidents. There's just one job after another. So from 2006 to 2007, I had this job. From 2007 to 2009, I had this job. 9 to 10, I had this job. 10 to 11, I had another job. And now in the last 3 years, I've had 3 more jobs. So it's just not good. People look for loyalty, Ronnie. If you're hiring somebody, if you're a hiring manager, right? You don't want to hire a guy that's just just started looking for a job 6 months after he got a new one.
Right.
I mean, that's discouraging. That's like, I don't want that candidate. I want a candidate that stuck it out, that didn't change.
Right.
Before the pandemic for no reason, and didn't change as a result of the pandemic, and now hasn't changed because there's such a thing called the Great Resignation. So I just think that it's not wise to keep moving your job and changing your job and making your resume look like a traffic accident. You need stability, consistency, and loyalty, and commitment. And if companies don't see that, they don't sense it, they don't hear it, they don't see it on your resume, they don't like it.
Yeah. I think I think the certain mobility is looked on favorably. I mean, sometimes if you've been in the same job for 10 years or something like that, people go like, you're not progressing, you're not moving on, you're not getting new skills and new experiences. But moving too much, I think you're exactly right. It shows instability.
Let me comment on that, because you made a good point. It used to be 10 years. 10 years was like a benchmark.
Right.
Okay. But it isn't 10 years anymore. The average stay today is 3.7 years.
Wow.
The average stay in America. So there's no 25-year gold watch. There's no 10 years. There isn't even 5 years anymore. The average person staying 3.7 years. So in my opinion, this is a really bad trend that is, I think, being destructive to the productivity of the workforce and to the individual, who's eventually going to run out of reasons to change jobs and have to stay at a job he may not like.
Right.
So I would say what I recommend to people is, when you take a new job, don't even think about leaving for 3 years. Don't even think about leaving for 3 years.
Right.
Be the one that resisted the temptation.
Yeah. I think that, you've mentioned that there's certain things change, but there's certain basic principles, pillars that don't change. And I think, stability and commitment, loyalty, as long as you're making contribution and advancing, I think is looked upon favorably. Recently I had I'm involved in a nonprofit organization, and we were looking at the staff has been meeting remotely, and so we had a decision to make. It's possible people are going to come back to the office. What were we going to do? How are we going to do this? And the staff put together a plan for the executive director of this program. Said, well, we've put together a program we think works, and it's basically a hybrid plan. Most people can work remotely. We have planned to come into the office on certain occasions. We're here, we're connected. And there was the organization that was overseeing this program was a little bit skeptical. And I just said, listen, this is where we are. I said exactly what you said. You want to attract the best candidates. this is what we need to do, but we need to have a plan. But the main thing I said is this remote structure and process can work, but look at it and say, can we meet our goals? Can we meet our objectives doing this? If we can't, then we don't do it. Don't do it just because it's trendy. So there's still certain basic premises, which is, can you meet your mission? Can you meet your goals? Can you meet your, staff objectives? And then you can move forward and say, okay, let's get with this, this hybrid formula.
Yeah.
But don't ignore the basic tenets of good management, and hiring and retention.
Yeah. And who doesn't want loyalty? I mean, in this crazy world that we live in, who doesn't want loyalty? I mean, loyalty is one of the reasons you hire someone is because you think that they're going to be loyal to you and to your cause and to your company.
Right.
And you can't be loyal if you're changing jobs 3 times in 3 years.
Right.
And you can't pretend that you're being loyal.
Right. Now, is part of that trend just because of availability of jobs, or are there job shortages, or just mobility, that there's just much more American mobility? Or
well, I mean, we have to look at a couple of different industry sectors. Let's look at the big growth area of biotechnology.
Okay.
Why is this so big? Well, Pfizer is producing these vaccines, and so is Moderna and Johnson and Johnson, and all these great companies are providing biotechnology equipment and products for the production of pharmaceuticals, which is a huge field. And if you look at that sector, it's been insulated all the way through. So since before COVID and right through now to present day, we can't find the candidates, Ron. We have not been able to find the candidates despite all that has gone on. But the hybrid thing that's now happening is affecting some of our IT jobs, because we're getting more IT placements because people are getting to work from home for a couple of days on a VPN, so that it's quite confidential what they're doing. It's just hard to say where this is really going. It's really difficult to say what's going to look like in a few years, but I think it's going to look something like what we have now. With people that can working from home at least a couple of days a week.
Right. So we have a lot more to talk about. I think we're gonna take a short break, Scott, in a couple of seconds. But folks, I want you to just don't go anywhere. We're going to be coming back with Scott Possessor, premier job expert and radio show host himself. And we'll have much more to talk about the job market in terms of not only just what's happening now, but generally what's happening post-pandemic, what things are always there and what are always the issues. And Scott's got a lot of good advice about that. So don't go away, anybody. We'll be right back. We'll see you soon. Welcome back, folks. We're talking today with Scott Possessor, Senior Vice President of Executive Alliance, a national recruiting firm, and host of the weekly radio show, Radio Jobline, which airs on Saturdays at 2 p.m. on 103.9 FM, where I am, Long Island. Also, you can find it online at www.linewsradio.com/Radio Jobline. Now, before we continue our conversation, I just wanted to mention you can listen to several of Scott's previous shows, as well as read a number of his insightful articles about job hunting. Just go to his LinkedIn page, connect by LinkedIn, or go to his company's blog, execallied.com/blog. So you can see all of Scott's work and learn much more about what he's doing. So that take advantage of that. So before the break, we were talking about a lot of the tumultuous things happening in the job market, some of which are COVID related. But, and some of it, let's look at some of the things we've talked about in our previous show, but continue to be sort of an issue, which is that, job hunting is still challenging. I think part of what you mentioned is that it's what makes it challenging today is that a lot of companies their HR staffs are understaffed. And so they're not getting back to people. We talked about the black holes of the online job process and the ghosting. So how do people react to that, Scott? What do they do to basically break through that syndrome of feeling like they're being ghosted by companies?
Well, I wish there was a way to, like a formula or an answer to that question that would be satisfactory. Mm-hmm. But I just think ghosting is something we all live with now. Ron, if you decided to go on an interview tomorrow and all of a sudden, and you went on your interview, and a week later, you haven't heard anything.
Right.
2 weeks later, you haven't heard anything. So now you're going to send a follow-up note,
Right.
in your own inimitable journalistic way, and capture my attention. I'm the hiring manager, but I have nothing to say to you. I'm still sourcing new candidates for the job. I haven't finished my painful process of saying, here are my 3 or 4 best candidates. So I don't have time, or I'm playing the role of the hiring manager. I don't have time to answer every candidate that writes to me and says, well, where am I in the process? Am I still being considered? All you want to know is the truth. You
Right.
don't need anybody to sugarcoat it for you. But the fact is, there's nobody available to answer that call, and
Right.
and there's nothing to say, in a positive vein. Now if the guy did have time, and I see this happening more with smaller companies than with larger companies, because they're all automated.
Right.
All the larger companies are automated. So the smaller company, a great HR guy will write back and say, Ron, thanks so much for following up. Still in the sourcing process. Should have some answers in the next few weeks. Wouldn't that be great? To get a little response like that, but it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's like everybody's hiding behind that ghosting is okay, when ghosting is really not okay.
Right.
And it's very destructive to the interview process.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you certainly will get some individualized attention if you're in the secondary or tertiary processes of making the cut for high level jobs. But other than that, I think you're right. It just doesn't happen. And I've talked to some people about it, and it's frustrating and it's discouraging. But I say to them, listen, don't take this personally. It is what it is. Now there are ways that you've developed, some of what you call your stealth job hunting tactics, which I think are helpful. One of them, is that you're a master at is the use of LinkedIn. So talk a little bit more about that, about how you use that as a really, valuable job hunting asset.
Well, once LinkedIn came to town, the ghoster can really not ghost you effectively, because you can always reach out to them on LinkedIn. So in a worst case scenario, when you have an interview, you don't have the email address of the person to follow up with. So that's a bad scene. You should always ask for that, by the way, Ron.
Right.
Always ask for contact information so that you can send that follow-up note.
Right.
I think follow-up notes are still very powerful, and if they receive them at the right time and they're grammatically perfect and they summarize all the best reasons the company should, they're powerful. And people should send follow-up notes. But what if you don't have the email address? And that's what they hid behind, because, with most companies, it's first name dot last name at Cisco.com. But it's just not like that with every company. So, but with LinkedIn, they can't escape you. So you go to LinkedIn, you find a person and you message them. And so basically, LinkedIn is not a safe harbor now. That it's being used to eliminate ghosting, but they still do the same thing. They don't respond, or they will just make a really quick crypto response. Say, hey, sorry, I haven't gotten back to you. I'll get back to you next month, whatever. So it's not really helping. The fact is, when companies don't get back to you, they don't want you. Okay, and you have to move on. And you have to get over that and move on. If a company is interested in me, they're not going to let 4 to 6 weeks go by,
right?
To let me know that they're going to give me some kind of hint, that there's still interest. Hey, Scott, sorry, I haven't gotten back to you, but we're still thinking on it. We're still working on the search, and we're still thinking about you, and we'll be in touch. That is, I expect nothing less than that. But if someone goes that 3, 4, 5 weeks, no response, not even to my lovely little follow-up note, then I have to assume that company is not interested in me, and I've already moved on from them.
Right. Yeah. Now, one of the things you also mentioned in our previous conversations, and I think that it's worth repeating, is just using LinkedIn not only in that capacity, follow up, but also just to find out more about a company, and in terms of gaining access and entry to them, and figuring out what they're about, how you can make this the interviewing process as productive and powerful as before you try to follow up.
Well, yeah, LinkedIn has a great feature. Not only can you search for people, but you can search for companies.
Right.
So let's say now I go on an interview at Newsday, okay, and I can go type in Newsday into the search bar on LinkedIn, and up will come a question. Are you looking for the company LinkedIn page, or are you looking for people that have worked at Newsday? And I would click people. Okay. And up will come hundreds of people that have worked at Newsday, or still work at Newsday, or did work at Newsday 10 or 20 years ago, whatever. If their name is associated with Newsday in their LinkedIn profile, up their name will come. Okay. And what I have been preaching all along is for people to answer a post. Okay. So you saw a post for Newsday, you answered it, you went through proper channels, but now you're not done.
Right.
You are just not done. You've got to go do that search for Newsday, find the people that work there, and start clicking connect with as many of them as possible. And let's face it, people are on LinkedIn to connect with other people. That's why they're there. Right. So while 100% of the people won't respond and connect, certain percentage will. Maybe 20, 25% of the people you reach out to will actually connect with you. Then you can send them a note. Hey, Ron, thanks for connecting. I'm very interested in Newsday. I've been following the company for a long time. Would love to get some inside information about what kind of systems the company uses, what kind of a company is it to work for. Can you? And also, your background is really interesting to me. Can you give me 5 minutes? Next Wednesday, let's set up a quick call. And if that person is impressed with what you've done and how you've handled yourself and what you've said on that call, they can walk your resume in to the hiring manager, and now you're giving it to them from both sides. So you send in the right resume and cover letter, and now you're going through the networking phase. And everybody always used to say, well, networking is the best way to find a job, and it most certainly is. But LinkedIn is like networking on steroids.
Right. Yeah, and I think that it adds some credibility. People want to know who knows you, and if somebody in the company knows you, that gives a little bit more assurance to people who are looking to hire. Oh, okay, now I've got some firsthand knowledge about this person, not just what he puts down his references.
Right. And also, let's not forget the obvious. If I type Newsday into my own connections, I'm going to get people that either work there now or did work there. Right. So and I've got 8,000 connections. So the likelihood is, it's a Long Island newspaper. I'm a Long Island guy. I'm in the media. I probably know somebody that works there or worked there, and then they can walk my resume in. So job hunting today is, LinkedIn creates more work, but it creates more opportunity to get in front of the employer. Right.
Now, what about some of the old standbys? Like we've talked about this before, but anything new with cover letters in terms of whether they're still useful? Are there any new wrinkles in them, or what do you think about that?
Well, I'm going to combine my marketing hat and my job hunting hat.
Okay.
To answer that question. Okay. Because if you are writing a cover letter and I make it easy for the hiring manager to see why I've applied for the role, why I would be a good candidate for the role, then a cover letter is super powerful. But if you just write a stupid cover letter like, a dear, to whom it may concern, I'm attaching my resume for the job as a Schmendrick, and I'm totally qualified for this role and whatever. You haven't done anything. You've accomplished nothing. Show me the research. Show me, put it all together for me. Show me what the 3 best attributes you bring to the table are for this particular role. So you start the letter, the cover letter or the cover note, whatever you want to call it. You start it by saying, my extensive background as a journalist, writer, and editor should be of interest to your company's role for a managing editor.
Right.
So off the bat, those are my 3 top things that I bring to the table in sentence number 1. Okay. And then in sentence number 2, I have extensive background. And then you're going through now the bullets in the job description. And I have extensive background in this one. And now you're hitting all the high notes, and you're letting the guy see that you are a great candidate for this role. Okay. So you haven't wasted the cover letter on with a form letter, that just says you're attaching your resume. You've used the opportunity to express how well you express yourself and how well you can express yourself and how great your skills are for this particular role, which is what people don't do enough of and should do more of.
Right. Now, if you don't have a name, I mean, should you even send a cover letter? If I can't
Yeah,
say, dear Mr. Possessor.
a lot of these nowadays, these systems like Taleo or any of the more popular Bullhorn or applicant tracking systems that you're going to see today, they do have a little slot for a cover letter. Sometimes it's kind of small, but you
Right.
can put a lot of information in it. It looks
Right.
small from the outside, but you can pack it with a well-written cover note that's very persuasive. And
Right.
and if you're going to send a boring, here's attaches my resume cover letter, don't bother. But
Right.
if you're going to send me a cover letter that shows me you've researched my company and you're giving me your best attributes for the role in the first and second sentence of the cover letter, then I think you should do it every time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think things like this are still important now, even with the pandemic, even people talking about, well, there's a job shortage, people looking for jobs they can't hire. My sense is that may all be true. And yet I get the sense also that companies are being very much more selective about how they hire. So I think number one, they don't know what the future is going to bring. They don't know where we're going exactly. So they're being careful about hiring.
Mhm.
They know they need people, but they're not saying, all right, let's just hire people and fill these fill these desks or fill these virtual desks, whatever.
Mhm.
So I think that people need to know that there's the selection process. I think is very very much a cautious one, and don't think just because there's a job shortage that people are just going to hire you.
Yeah, it's not easier. It's not easier to find a job, but that we have more tools today.
Hmm.
And I do think that a well-written cover letter is a very, very overlooked, persuasive tool. But a
Hmm.
poorly written cover letter is a distraction.
Right. Right.
Complete. I mean, I've seen cover letters with spelling mistakes,
Mm.
and I've seen cover letters addressed to the wrong job. They're using a form letter, and it says should be of interest to your job for a bartender. Well, I'm not applying for a role as a bartender. So what are you doing, buddy? You're wasting my time
Right.
here.
Right.
So your cover letter has to be. You need a second set of eyes.
Right.
I always tell people, get an editor, get your favorite editor, get the smartest person okay, to look over your cover letters, look over your resume, and so that it's not just you. But I do think that they're powerful, very powerful.
Right. Right. So let's add on the correlate to that is the resume. Cover list and resume go hand in hand. So what's the latest about that in terms of, are there new wrinkles in putting together resumes?
Well, I have a thought on that, and so far the people that I've introduced this thought to over the last year or two have been supportive. But some people say, well, you don't want to just mimic what's in the bullets of the job description because they're going to think you did that on purpose.
Right.
And then I hear that argument and I go, yeah, I did do it on purpose. So what's the problem? But what some people say is, well, you shouldn't use the bullets from the job description on your resume. And I say, why not? Why not? If the company is giving you 8 bullets and they're saying, these are the 8 things we want you to be good at in order to hire you. Okay. Why don't you, and you've got them because you're in this business, you're
Right.
in that field. So why don't you take those bullets and copy them and paste them right onto your resume? Now, this is going to screw up your whole resume. It's going to be too long. It's going to have duplication. So you got to go over it with a fine tooth comb. You don't want to put anything on the resume that isn't 100% true, that you can't 100% support. So maybe some of the bullets don't get on the resume, but those that are framed a certain way by the company, they're worded in such a way as to be very clear about what they're looking for. You should be giving it right back to them. The first thing they're saying is must have experience as a CPA. Okay. So the first thing on your resume is received my CPA in 2019. Why not?
Mhm.
Because the company says, I want this. So give them what they want. Don't just keep giving them the same stuff that you give everybody else.
Right.
Okay. Give them, customize for them that you've got what they're looking for. And if there's 8 bullets and you come up with 6 that fit and that sound right, and that you've wordsmithed to make sure they don't sound copied and pasted, but they sound original, okay, then you've got a fabulous resume. I'm going to keep reading it. I'm just going to keep on reading it right to the very end if you did
Yeah.
it that way the whole way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think if you're a little creative about it and you're just not, as you say, copy and pasting, but you're looking at each bullet and crafting, customizing a response to that bullet, then
Mhm.
I think that works quite well.
But it's
Yeah.
also good to use some of the verbiage, not all of the verbiage, some of the verbiage, the
Right.
way companies frame things, like why are they saying this thing first? Why did they decide that this is the first bullet? It's not an accident.
Right.
They put that because they think that's the most important bullet.
Right.
Okay. So that should be the most important bullet on your resume, and it
Right.
should be first.
Right.
Okay. So that is the way I look at it. I feel as though the bullets on the resume can be very compelling in expressing to a company why you're such a great fit for the role.
Right. Right. And I think, when you combine that with some of your research and reconnaissance with people on LinkedIn who know the company, it
Mhm.
can help you further craft, how to customize those bullets. Like you can find out more information about, what is it specific about these? Which are the really top ones here? They might give you some information so you can do some sort of cross research, that kind of gives some ballast to your application as well.
Yeah. And then of course you capitalize on those things that have relevancy to what you've learned.
Right, right. Great. So listen, we're going to take another quick break, Scott. So folks, we're talking with Scott Possessor from Executive Alliance about jobs and job hunting 45 forward or any age really. 25 forward, 45 forward, 65 forward. But we're going to take a 2-minute break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with much more in our final segment with Scott. Welcome back, folks. We're talking with Scott Possessor, the Senior Vice President of Executive Alliance, a national recruiting firm, and a premier job expert. So before the break, folks, we were talking about some of the nuts and bolts of job hunting that are here before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and will be here after the pandemic. And Scott went through a number of them: how to use LinkedIn, cover letters that count, creating the perfect resume. There's one last piece I wanted to talk about a bit, which we've talked about before, but again is something really interesting, which is preparing for the interview and communication style during that process.
The interview, first of all, you got to be prepared, Ronnie. You've got to be able to walk into an interview or sit down at your desk for an
Hmm.
interview and be able to tell the company how you can help them achieve their goals. If I have a candidate that sits down with me and says, "Here's how I can help you achieve your goals," I'm going to listen. I'm going to pay attention. But so many candidates don't walk in there with a strategy of how they can help the company achieve their goals. They're prepared to talk about themselves. This is me. I'm so good. I'm wonderful. I'm fabulous. I'm a fast learner. I'm adaptable. I'm all these. I've got all these soft skills that you can't do without. Well, that's not true. They can do without your soft skills. They want to know how you can help them. Now, how can you tell them how you can help them if you haven't researched and research and talk to people on LinkedIn that work for the company and get what's going on at the company, the culture, the problems they face, the what is wrong with this company? Every company has issues. What are the issues of this company? And once you have that information to package that into what you're talking about on the interview, very, very powerful stuff. But people know that. Okay, people, they don't do it, but they know it, and they don't do it to the degree that I would like them to. And I actually wind up with my candidates going through Google with them and saying, "Well, Google this, and you'll see what happens here, and you'll see what information that it has here, and so on and so on." So a guy goes to me, I wish I knew what kind of computer system the company used, right? So that because he's an IT guy,
Right.
so I said, do you know how to use a browser? He goes, yeah. You know what a browser is? Yeah. Okay. Google what type of computer system does blankety blank company use? Just trust me. And up comes the answer. I mean, it's that was, how hard was that?
Right.
Right. So you just can't imagine the stuff that's available to you, through our friends at Google, that is so useful on job interviews. But there's one thing that people overlook, and that is the style of the interviewer.
Mhm.
So there are some interviewers that are totally stimulated by what they see, visual interviewers. So, for example, if you were looking at me and you're a visual guy and you're looking at me, you're going, well, that plant behind him is not centered. That's going to bother you. The whole time you're talking to me, it's going to bother you. Okay. But let's say you're not visually stimulated. You're more of an auditory guy. You think in terms of what you hear. Well, maybe you're liking my voice because I have that broadcaster's tone in
Mhm.
my voice, and I'm using it to capture your attention. I'm lowering my voice or I'm raising my voice. Okay. So there's the auditory people. You got to look out for them. And then there's the emotional communicators. This guy wants to, when you shake his hand, he wants to put his hand on top of your hand,
Mhm.
make that feeling, that connection, almost physical connection, which is harder and harder now with COVID, nearly impossible. But if you see people with dirt on their light switch and piles of paper on their floor, they're very likely not visual. You don't need to paint them pictures with words. So let's say you're interviewing me for a real estate job. Okay. And I've discovered you are a visual communicator, Ron Rowell. Well, I'm
Mhm.
going to say, imagine what it would look like when you drive up the driveway of this house with the snow falling on the roof gently in the backdrop, right? I've created a visual image for you because I know you're visual, right? But if I think you're auditory, I'm going to say, imagine what it's going to be like living in this house without the screeching sirens and honking horns of New York City, but just the gentle chirping of crickets.
Mhm.
And now I've created an auditory experience for you. And then the emotional, well, how would you feel driving up the driveway of this house? Would it give you a warm glow? So there are words that you can use and things that you can use. And of course, finding out if someone's visual, auditory, or kinesthetic is easy as pie, because they will let you know as soon as you ask them to explain something, they're going to use verbs. And you're going to see they're going to use see, watch, and the ones that are connected to visual, or they're
Right.
going to say feel and touch,
Right.
okay, or they're going to say hear and listen. And so it's very easy to determine what a person's style is. I think this is an overlooked way to make a connection with an employer because they kind of feel like you're sort of communicating from the same perspective and using the same style. So again, it's not a mimicking thing. It's just picking up on their style and saying, okay, I see their style, and now I'm going to
Right.
paint the proper picture with the proper brush.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that these are important tools. Just thinking to our audience here of the 45 Forward group, that basically these are tools you can use at any point in your career and are going to have to keep using them because the chances are you're going to be working longer. Um, and for lots of reasons, we're living longer, so I think that a lot of people aren't, retiring the way they used to. They're going into a phased retirement, or they may want to shift careers, or they might want to do something different in retirement. They may want to, play golf and relax and become a snowbird. That's fine, but I want to talk about, what should people be thinking about, as from an age perspective. I know there are still issues of, late age discrimination, but I think that that's something we're coming to terms with. And we've talked about this before, but let's sort of revisit where are we now with that as people, especially with the pandemic. I think some people are looking at, well, maybe it is time to retire, look for something else. But what would be your thoughts about that?
Well, the Great Resignation was definitely a contributor to additional retirement that would
Hmm.
not have happened. But for your specific audience of 45 people, that 45-year-old people moving forward, 40s, 50s,
Right.
60s, I think the Great Resignation is very, very helpful to them
Hmm.
because the talent pools are not as fertile as they once were.
Hmm.
And you can point to a goodly number of talent pools that have been deeply affected by the Great Resignation and by the competition for the best candidates. So I think if at 45 or 50 you felt maybe you were being discriminated against, maybe that discrimination is a little bit less right now. They're not so much looking at your age, they're looking for that commitment, that loyalty, the things we talked about before that you can't prove if you keep changing jobs.
Right. Right.
So try to get your company to make the changes before you leave your job. That's a very important message today. but I think the over 45 worker has been is benefiting from the Great Resignation. It's not really a factor right now. I wouldn't hesitate to apply for a job, Ron. I'm in my 60s. If I thought I had to look for a job, I would look for one and feel as though I'm going to get a fair shake,
Right.
which maybe 2 years ago I might not have.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people are, realizing that experience counts and knowledge counts. And I think that it's not just salary. It's not just, well, I'm going to, try to unload some salary burden here. It's like, yeah, but what do you want to, what do you need? What does your company need? And I think that, I think companies are getting a little bit more aware of just having the importance of an age balance of younger and older. And I think, that I think, in both ways, I think older people still have a lot of energy. They're in better shape. They're in better health. So you can say, well, younger people have more energy. It's like, well, so do older people. They have, I think younger people have technological capability, but I think that's the gap there. I think is also closing. I think
Oh,
that they're,
very much. Yes.
yeah,
The average person in their 40s and 50s today is a power user.
right,
That just is that's a nothing. That's not even a factor anymore. I just think that when people look at you on a monitor, like which is the way a lot of interviews are happening nowadays, they want to see someone who's energetic, who's dressed in a snappy way, who looks as though he's vital, and
right,
he or she and has a lot of energy and communication style and power. And that's what we're looking for. We're not looking for age anymore.
right, right. Yeah. I think about well, we just had a Zoom birthday celebration for one of my aunt who was just turned 100
Mm.
and still communicates with her grandchildren on not only email but on Zoom and also uses Google to find out what they tell her what they're working on, a lot of them are working on research, and she Googles the research to find out what they're talking about so she could be conversant with them, and and I have I think, well, he must be about 92, 93 now, a cousin who he was a retired mathematics teacher, and I said, well, what are you doing now? And he's like, well, he'd always liked to build furniture. Now he's learning how to, make guitars, make violins, craft them out of wood. And I said, well, what do you do for just relaxation? He goes, eh, I work on math problems, tutorial, exponential equations. I'm like, okay, so I think that we are in a stage where people are more vital and making changes later on. And I think the other thing that I just wanted to mention as we come to a close is that I think the gradual progression of women being in the workforce. I think that people have made there's been a bit written about, well, the Great Resignation has affected women more, and then they're going at home and and they're staying at home and taking care of their families. I think that's true, but I think that this tension has been there for a while about the work-life balance. So I think that this has put a spotlight on that, but I think is also it's you know th- the 50s style of women staying home. I think we realize is more of a blip
Yeah.
than what has been more true of our society, which is women have worked.
Well, imagine being a woman during this pandemic, and your kids are in school every day, and you don't know from one day to the next when your kids are going back to school. How can
Right.
you possibly work?
Right.
And husbands don't have to deal with that in most cases. So
Right.
I admire and respect the women that have put up with this pandemic, and they're putting up with something that us men are not putting up with.
Right. Right. And I think I think the gap there is closing slightly too. I can speak for myself personally, but I think that men who have had an opportunity to be at home go like, I can participate in ways that I couldn't before, and I can do things at home that I couldn't do, and I can spend more this business about, well, I'm going to retire to spend more time with my kids. It's like, well, you don't have to do that anymore. You can spend more time now. So
Mm.
I think that's been an interesting, side effect of the pandemic. But Listen, Scott, there's it's always fun talking with you. There's a lot more we can keep talking about. We're coming to the end of our show. I want to thank you for another terrific, thought-provoking conversation. Now, people want to reach you, Scott. What's the best way to reach you? Through LinkedIn?
Well, I would recommend to everyone connect with me on LinkedIn, and there's two reasons. All of my radio shows are posted on my LinkedIn account. If you're
Right.
interested in a job hunting radio show that's been on the air 1,000 years, just connect with me on LinkedIn. Tell me you met me on you heard me on Ron Rowell's 45 Forward show. And if they want to write to me, I'll give you my email address. I'm happy to answer any emails or questions people may have about job hunting, whether they're over 45 or not. And my email address is scott@execsallied.com, EXECSALLIED.com.
Right. And you could also, if you want to listen to this show as a podcast, you can go to my site, rowellresources.com. You'll see at the top of my 45 Forward tab, there'll be a link to our show. There'll be some more information about Scott. And in case you missed it, you'll have this contact information there as well. So once again, folks, tell your friends if you missed my conversation, you can still listen to it as a podcast on voiceamerica.com. Or as I said, listen to it on my show, 45 Forward. Rowell Resources 45 Forward tab. You can also find it on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. And if you want to send me comments or suggestions for future shows, email me at ron.rowell@gmail.com. So, folks, be sure to join me next Monday, 12 noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time. I'll be talking with John Leland, a reporter for the New York Times, who's the author of Happiness is a Choice You Make, which is a fascinating chronicle of lessons learned by John Leland by spending a year with several people who were known as the oldest old, people over 85, who are now the fastest growing segment of our population. So, folks, until then, keep moving forward, 45 Forward.